Please help me welcome to the stage Jonah and Sam.
Hello. Hey, so I'm Sam Zelich, Senior Community Events Manager at Squarespace.
And I'm Jonah Pessin, SEO Manager at Squarespace.
So, Jonah, you are the SEO guy here. Why am I here dressed as a Ghostbuster? The answer is because what I do, I work with the Circle community, which is a 100,000 plus strong community of website builders and digital experts. Many of them are SEO experts, AI explorers as well. And earlier this year, many of them noticed that their website traffic took a nosedive. It caused quite an alarm amongst this community until some of them figured it out. And we actually talk about this in the monthly podcast that I do called Circle Live with them. So on this podcast, we'll talk to experts about various things. I thought it would be great for me to take to this stage today and talk to an SEO expert and do kind of the same thing. I'm going to be asking you some hard questions today, but I think you have the answers. The first one, Jonah, is with this huge change, the thing they wanted to know, what's changing, how are things changing? I know that you and your team at Squarespace have analyzed a whole bunch of data, and just tell us what is the data that you have, what have you found, and contextualize it for us a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So I imagine everyone in this room has probably seen kind of the wave of LinkedIn posts or blog posts where it's just, a singular chart of a Google Search Console account or a case study that contains like 5 websites in it. And for me, that doesn't really contextualize what we're seeing. And oftentimes, I'm left kind of wanting a little bit more. So what we really wanted to do is figure out, okay, what is the scale of what's happening and how can we actually prove out and contextualize some of these things. And we sit at a very interesting and kind of unique perspective in that we have access to a lot of real data from a lot of real websites, where a lot of these other studies might be coming from, projections or clickstream data or things like that, but we have the real website data. So what we did is we partnered with our insights and analytics team, and we analyzed over 3 million Squarespace websites. And here's a little bit of what we found. So to start, going back to your question, kind of what are we seeing, what's shifting in kind of this environment? So focusing in on AI referrals, we see that AI referral traffic is up about 136% since the start of this year across all of our Squarespace websites. So this is kind of that first proof point that we have at, this channel emerging, or these spaces emerging as sort of a new area for marketers. And if we zoom out a little bit, we see AI traffic has grown over 1,200% since July of 2024. So again, these channels are rapidly becoming a new space for distribution, for discovery, and it's something that we definitely need to be paying attention to. But with that in mind, it's also important to kind of keep perspective, when it comes to sort of the overall share of traffic, AI is still pretty small, right? I think a lot of us see that. It is growing, but it's a small piece of the pie. In fact, when we're looking at, all of the traffic going to websites, we see that it only makes up 0.1% of website traffic. And that's not 1%, 0.1%. So as we, again, try to contextualize some of these changes that we see, some of the kind of shifting environment, it's really important to keep that perspective. I know from my end, right, if you are going to a decision maker, if you are going to a client and you say, hey, we want to focus all of our attention on this channel that's only bringing in 0.1% of our traffic, that's probably not going to go over that well. So it's important to kind of keep that context. So next, in terms of where that traffic is coming from, to no one's surprise, it's mostly ChatGPT, right? We see over 80% of the AI referrals coming from ChatGPT, That is 12 times more than Perplexity, which is the next closest. You can see this graph here. ChatGPT is kind of at the top, and then we see this long tail of all these other players in different areas. It reminds me a bit of market share and graphs you see on the organic search side, with Google right at the top and a lot of the other players kind of just tailing pretty far behind. And in my mind, right, I think about, okay, where do I want to prioritize my efforts? I know how often I'm checking Google Search Console. I barely check big webmaster tools, and it's kind of the same thing here. Like ChatGPT is going to be our biggest focus. You want to check in on some of these other things, but it's not going to be the main thing that we're looking at. And then in terms of, how that is comparing, again, back to Google, Google is still king, right? Like we see that the incumbent is still the incumbent. There is 280 times more traffic organically coming from Google than all of these AI services combined. So when we talk about disruption, it's more of a blip, right? It's not necessarily a wholesale replacement that a lot of people are trying to convince you of at this point in time. So I think the big thing for me is I think about, again, our strategies and how do we adapt to this new world is that, your AIO strategy, GEO, kind of whatever you want to call it, it is additive, it's complementary, it's not necessarily something that's going to replace your SEO strategy. So with that in mind, again, a lot of people like to say SEO is dead, but that's just not what we're seeing, right? And our data is backing this up. We see healthy amounts of organic traffic coming through to our millions of websites, and we're not seeing this huge drop-off that you're seeing reported in some other places. And we kind of know, right? Like that's not going to be the case for everybody. There are different markets, different verticals, different industries are going to have different headwinds. But on the macro level, we're not seeing traffic dropping off coming from Google. If we look at our average organic sessions per site coming from Google, and this again is millions of sites, it's pretty steady, right? Like we're not seeing that huge decline. If anything, it went down maybe 1%, 2%, something small, but we're not seeing that huge drop off that other people are reporting. And again, this is at that macro level. So when we think about how AI is kind of disrupting the space, or organic maybe a channel that you need to reconsider, things of that nature, that's just not what we're seeing within the data right now.
This is fascinating stuff, and I think most of the community members that I work with will look at this and say, that's not what I'm seeing. But they, I think, can accept that maybe there's some learnings here. I think the number one question that they would have coming across this data would be, we know something is changing, and we know we need to prepare for the future. So what would you say to that? How do we prepare for whatever this is that's coming?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of how do we prepare, Squarespace is doing a lot of stuff on our end, right? We are building out a lot of new products, we're building out a lot of new features that is going to prepare people for this new world, right? Because again, going back to what I was saying before, we see this as additive, we see this as complementary, thinking about, okay, how can I optimize for this surface versus, hey, I'm replacing my SEO strategy with these new strategies. It's something to layer on top. So outside of all of the great content we're pushing out, all of the guides we're putting together, there's kind of a few basics and a few kind of key pillars that we are sort of leaning on here. So the first is nail the basics, right? It's pretty self-explanatory. You need to make sure your site is crawlable, it's indexable. You are focusing on the things that you have always been kind of focusing on from an SEO perspective. They are still going to be super important. We know that ChatGPT and other LLMs, they are reaching the web, and if they can't find your content in some of those areas, then you are going to suffer from a visibility aspect when it comes to this kind of new world. And the next piece is really thinking about how can we think outside of just our own website? Historically, right, as SEOs, we are oftentimes really focused on our own website and what we're doing on that website. But realistically, we need to start thinking about, okay, where is my website showing up? Where are conversations about my brand showing up? And how can we optimize for those things? We need to be in the right channels, whether that is in social channels, on YouTube, within forums. You need to be asking yourself, where are the conversations about my brand happening, and am I in there? And then the next piece is kind of an extension of that, is really building your brand authority, focusing on, okay, are we a authority in the space? Are we publishing content that positions us as somebody that is knowledgeable within the space, within a brand that, say, is, containing all of these different things. So it's super important from a brand authority perspective to continue to build that and really focus on that piece. And then the last piece of this is adapting and experimenting. I think as marketers, we oftentimes want to focus on or have these neatly packaged playbooks of, hey, if I do these 3 things, my site is going to skyrocket to the moon. But unfortunately, what is going to work for my brand, what is going to work for my company, may be totally different what's going to work for another company, right? So we provide a lot of great material and a lot of great things that are sort of the jumping off point, but ultimately you're going to need to be doing testing on your own. And you're going to need to be looking at, okay, what channels am I in? What are the content formats I'm producing? What are these different levers that I can pull to try to optimize for these things? And then how can I adapt and continue to expand beyond some of these things that you might be testing?
This is great. I think our community is really open to these things, and I think that I also don't want to paint the picture of them as helpless. As far as adapting, experimenting, and figuring all of this out together, it's one of the things that they're able to do in our community forum. You can sort of see it happening in real time. I actually have a quote from one of the members of our community, Becca Harpain. She runs a site called Inside the Square. She has these, see some heads nodding. Many of you have watched her webinars on building on Squarespace. Her explorations of AI led her to believe that it kind of reversed the way that we used to think about getting our content in front of people, and it no longer became about getting the clicks, but it became about providing the answers as clearly and concisely and contextually as possible. So I think this, the gloom and doom mentality that you might see isn't really the reality. When you start to get into there and you start to experiment with these tools, you start to see how they can be of value to you and developing a deeper relationship with your clients. I think, more than anything right now, it's about being seen as that authority, really chasing that authority in your space. But let's not take this for granted, right? I think that the data that we just shared with you is our own internal research. I happen to know that there's another study that you did with entrepreneurs that was just released today, actually. Why is this important? Not everybody here will consider themselves an entrepreneur, but I think we all know that entrepreneurs tend to be the early adopters in any new substantial technology. So what are the entrepreneurs saying in this survey?
Yeah, definitely. So as Sam was saying, we have recently published our entrepreneurship report. You can find that on the Squarespace blog. But as part of that report, we surveyed over 1,200 entrepreneurs on their AI usage, what they're using AI for, and just a lot of interesting data came out of that. And there's a few things that we wanted to kind of pull up here. When it comes to future-proofing, I think there's a lot of interesting nuggets specifically. One of the biggest things for me, right, is seeing this first stat that's coming up here, in that 43% of entrepreneurs today are already using AI for SEO. This number is not going to go down at any point, right? This is the lowest it's ever going to be, so it's only going to continue to grow from this point. So if you're not already using AI within your workflows, you're going to be falling behind. There are a ton of ways that you can be introducing that, but I think for me, and this is kind of going into the second point here a little bit, is that you need to be strategic about how you're leveraging and using AI and not using it as a crutch, right? Because oftentimes the output is kind of generic. I see this in my own world. We're building content, or we're writing blog posts, or we're optimizing pages, and a lot of times what you're getting out of these AI tools and systems is something that's not really going to set you apart from the crowd. So I think there's a huge unlock in being able to use AI for the things that are kind of like monotonous or time-taking, and then that unlocks a lot of more time for you to be able to think more strategically, think more creatively, and really focus on the things that are going to position you better against your competitors or other people in the space. I think another big piece of that, right, again, going back to the idea of using sort of AI as a crutch, as this number continues to grow and AI adoption continues to expand in this space, you're going to start running into these opportunities where, you know, a number of people are just going to rely on whatever a tool spits out to, say, optimize their pages or create new content or do whatever. And there's going to be this huge gap where, you know, if you are creating something that's actually valuable to your customers, that, you know, a human has actually touched, and you're not relying on sort of AI slop, like, you are going to be setting yourself up for success in kind of this new world and this new area that we're shifting towards. A couple other things that were interesting that we kind of pulled out of this report as well is just around trust in terms of AI versus employees, which we found was super interesting. Again, I think this goes back to being able to sort of automate and streamline a lot of the things that, you know, you might not want to be spending a ton of time on, pulling data or other things of that nature, where you can trust an AI with that, versus the more strategic or creative thinking that oftentimes we need, you know, actual humans to be doing.
Absolutely, I think that's a big component as well. The time-saving piece, the automation piece, that is huge. In fact, I have another quote from one of the members of our Circle community, from Pavlo Meniak. He runs an agency called Hulo.dev, just pointing out here that the AI tools that are already built into the Squarespace platform have gone from taken him a process that would take him normally a few hours. Now it takes just a few clicks, a couple of seconds. I also want to say that there are more AI tools that are going to be rolling out next week from Squarespace. So that is definitely something to watch for all Squarespace users and web builders. This is a big point too. The community that Pablo and Becca are a part of is one that everyone in this room can be part of. It's called the Circle community. It's free to sign up. If you get that QR code, you can sign up right now. You can join them on the forum. You can learn together in this new crazy world of AI. Don't do it alone. In addition to the value that you get of being part of this community, you also get discounts extended trials. There's exclusive product news that you can find out about ahead of everybody else, as well as priority support, which I think is pretty awesome. We end every episode of Circle Live with a punny sentiment about web design. So what I'll sign off with today is, for this SEO conference specifically, for the rest of the time here at brightonSEO, I hope you all find what you're searching for.
Thank you.